Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Rabbi Stephen here with you for this week's 10-Minute Torah. First, however, a big shout out to Sisterhood for what I understood. I wasn't here this weekend, as you know, and thank you for asking. My father is doing very well. He came through. He's very heavy. He's very healthy. So, one less thing to worry about. So, but again, I understand that Sisterhood had a very successful event, a magic show. Understand that there was a lot of people. It was very good. Uh, Food was great as usual. So, shout out to people that work so hard, to service our synagogue, preparing food for our Saturday morning kiddushes and doing some heavy legwork, donating money when necessary. So, again, thank you very much. Okay, so this week, Vayeshev, and he stayed. So the word Shev, a little note about ancient Hebrew. I'm getting more and more into actually reading the Hebrew from the Torah. One of the things that I've done, because, quite frankly, it's a little easier and less apt to make errors, because the Torah has to be read perfect. And, when you have, this is why you have a couple of people on either side, the Gabbaim, the Rosh Gabbai, the head person that calls people up, and the other Gabbai that's there as kind of a check. And you're also calling witnesses who, by the way, are also available to make sure that what's being read out of the Torah is perfect. This way, the people in the congregation can understand. So when you say Yashev, okay, that's the future tense. And in modern English, modern Hebrew, we know that it means he will stay. We know the word shave, which means sit. Word comes from the word Shabbat, which means rest, which means you're just staying, right? So in ancient Hebrew, biblical Hebrew, when you put a va, not a va, in front of it, that makes the future the past. Va in our time means and the. And this is why you see a lot of verses starting with the word va and then some verb and then the noun, which is doing the verb. That's kind of biblical Hebrew. So Vayeshev means that Jacob has stayed. So they have settled in Shechem in Canaan. And what is Jacob doing? He is studying with Joseph. Now, we have had portions that focused on Abraham, Adam and Eve, Noah, Abram, who became Abraham, and then we had Isaac for a parsha, and then we had Jacob for a couple of portions. Now it's switching to Joseph. Now, yes, Joseph was not a patriarch. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are our three patriarchs, and of course, in the modern conservative movement, hence modern Rabbi Shmuel, modern Rabbi Stephen, we also acknowledge the matriarchs: Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, the Leah. There's that again. Okay, so Jacob is spending a lot of time with Joseph, who is a prophet. He's got some prophecy because he has dreams. And in his case, they kind of get him in trouble. That is what our triennial portion is discussing. So what are they studying? Again, they're studying Torah. Okay? We haven't got Torah yet. Actually, that was what was so remarkable about the patriarchs. And we keep talking about this. Moses got the written Torah. It was written down first by God, and then he smashed them, then he wrote them, and then we had the commandments as dictated by God through Moses. And a lot of people have different opinions. The two main opinions is that Moses wrote the Torah up until the time when he left to go die, or to go leave his body, if you want to be metaphysical or spiritual about it, which at what point Joshua took over. Other people felt that there were sages that wrote the Torah. Anybody that remembers Dave Berg, who used to write the lighter side of Mad Magazine, and I believe he is of a blessed memory now, wrote a little book called My Friend God. He said, well, there's a belief that 70 sages wrote the Torah, which he claims is not true, because if 70 sages wrote the Torah, there'd be 70 versions. In fact, there wouldn't be 70 versions, there'd be 140. And there is actually a story about 70 sages, and that's why the Torah is also referred to as the Septuagint, because supposedly 70 rabbis were said in 70 different rooms by the Greeks, and they all came up with the same version, including some parts where the word is written one way and read another way. That's a story for another time. Getting back to Jacob and Joseph. So Joseph was Jacob's favorite son for a couple of reasons. Number one, he was the firstborn of his favorite wife, Rachel. The second is that he was very studious. He was like Jacob. Jacob was Ish Tam. He was a simple man that liked to, live in ohalim or tents, which, was a reference to study halls. Joseph was the same thing. However, a lot of the brothers were very jealous of him because he had Jacob's attention. They're out in the fields working for a living. He's sitting around studying. Now, consider this. This is from me. I've never read this in a commentary. This is just kind of my opinion. But I think there's another reason why the brothers were jealous of Joseph. When Jacob, in the last portion, Vayeshev was traveling from Haran to where he is now, Canaan, leaving Laban, and he knew he was going to have to encounter Esau in Edom. What did he do? He split the families, but think about this, he had the maidservants and the manservants in front of his train in case Esau and his army of 400 men attacked. The first people that they would encounter would be the maidservants and the manservants and the animals. And the maidservants, Zilpah and Bilhah, and then Leah and her sons, and who was in the back being protected by all this? Rachel and Joseph, and then Benjamin. So the brothers are looking behind them, seeing Joseph in the rear, like the most likely to survive any attack. And now here they are working in the fields for the family business, and there's Joseph hanging out at home with Dad. And what makes matters worse is that Jacob says, go see how your brothers are doing. Now, that's unclear. And the Torah does this. There are certain parts, a lot of parts actually, where it's very vague. It doesn't fill in a lot of blanks, which of course gave rise to the Midrash, from the word drash, which means to inquire, because God wants us to look at it and study it and analyze it and see what lessons we can glean. Very much like the Talmud, you have multiple analyses and multiple commentary, multiple opinions on the commentary. Some people say, again, Jacob was at fault for spending all his time exclusively with Joseph. Other people say, well, he looked at Joseph, kind of saw himself, and also Joseph was very much like Jacob, wanted to study, so that's why he spent time with him. Interestingly enough, again, as we go into the Torah, as we go into some of the laws in Exodus and Leviticus, we see a law that says that the firstborn is the firstborn, and the father does not pick and choose who he wants to give the bacharot, the privilege of the firstborn blessing, or the double portion that the firstborn gets. Under this ruling, under this law, Reuben would have gotten everything. But as it turns out, because Reuben was impetuous, he lost the birthright to be the firstborn. That went to Judah. He lost the prophecy. That went to Joseph. And he lost the ministry. That went to the Levites, to Levi. So, such as Reuben, we'll get to that in a little bit. So, Jacob sends Joseph off, and Joseph is, if you do the math, about 17. And the brothers are like, oh, here we go again. Here he is. And they already don't have a good feeling with him. He used to hang, the Torah talks about him being with the sons of Zilpah and Bilhah, because either the sons of Leah, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, and Judah didn't like him, or because he was demeaning them. They were the sons of the maidservants, not really good enough. So what do? They see him coming. They see he's wearing this beautiful coat that chieftains of tribes wore, that Jacob gave to him, which set him apart from the brothers. So what do? They take him, They want to kill him. Reuben intervenes, tells him, no, let's send him into slavery. Judah tries to rescue him as well. And what happens? We're not really sure. But the money is on the fact that he was sold to the Ishmaelites and then sold to the Midianites, or maybe the Midianite, he was going to be sold to the Ishmaelites, and the Midianites saw him and just grabbed him before they could close the sale. Anyway, he ends up in Egypt. And that's kind of where he's actually wins favor of the Chamberlain of the prisons, among other things, Potiphar. And that's a story for next week's portion. Actually, that's a study for next year because this is the triennial portion. But next week, we're going to learn about how Joseph finds favor with Pharaoh. In the meantime, Shabbat Shalom. I'm back. I'm happy to be back, and we're going to have services this week as usual. Remember, Friday night starts at 7:30. So see you then. In January, we're starting Saturday morning at 9:30, more in line with what conservative synagogues around the country do, so we can do the Shema most of the year at the right time. Shabbat Shalom.